Good afternoon to our listeners on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM and our viewers on the Parliament channel. We're just about to resume our coverage of the budget debate for fiscal 2016. Doors to the chamber have already been opened, indicating the imminent arrival of the presiding officer. So we take you over now for the continuation.
Honourable Speaker.
We now return to our coverage of the third sitting of the House in the first session of the 11th Parliament. It takes place on Friday, October 9th, 2015.
The Honourable Member for Tabaquite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the remaining minutes that I have, there are a couple of points I'd like to conclude with. Madam Speaker, the first one I'd like to deal with is the matter of the property tax. The government has announced that property taxes will return, the Revenue Authority will return, and so on. But I wonder how many persons in this country understand the implications of the return of the property tax. Madam Speaker, it is true that the Minister of Finance has said that they're going to revert to the 2009 rates, but that does not preclude the fact that the property tax will in fact return in the country. And based upon a publication by Ernst & Young in their 2016 measures review, they gave some important information about how this is going to be computed. And what they say is that based on current legislation, property tax will be computed as a percentage of the annual taxable value of the property. And there are three kinds of properties: residential, commercial, forestry, industrial, and agricultural properties. I want to deal with just residential. Residential properties will be categorized into 5 classes: executive, modern, standard, substandard, and shack. And this is how it will be calculated. 3%, the residential properties will be taxed at the rate of 3% of the ATV, which is the annual taxable value. And the annual taxable value is what is going to be important, because that is what the methodology of valuation is all about. And the methodology of valuation is the expected annual rent. So if I have an executive property, let's say Valsane, and that property can be rented for $25,000 a month, because the average property is selling for $10 million. So I'm just using a modest figure of $25,000 per month. That's $300,000 per year. 3% of $300,000 is $9,000. At a minimum is what the tax there. The average person there now pays about $900 a year in 2009. So $243, even better. So now you're going to pay 45 times what you were paying in 2009. So 40 times what you were paying in 2009 will be the property tax. 40 times more. So consider what's going to happen to the poor man who's paying $100 and he has to pay 40 times that. What is going to be his problem? So that's a big tax that's coming on the heads of people. I don't think people understood the implications of this property tax that is inevitably going to come back part of the scenario. And no, I'm not recommending don't pay tax at all. I'm not recommending that at all. I am saying that you said you're going to have consultation with the people, and I await the kind of consultation you're going to have with the people and to hear what the people have to say, because this is what you are in government. I don't have to tell you my plans. You are in government. You tell me what you are going to do in this country. You are in government. You said you know how to change around the country. You said you know how to bring down the deficit and everything is. And you tell us. Then Madam, the second point I want to deal with has to do with transport. Madam Speaker, we are talking a lot about rapid rail and so on. But between the time that we deal with getting rapid rail or mass transit or what have you comes into effect, it's going to be 4 or 5 years, maybe even more. And knowing the rate of execution of projects by the PNM, it might never happen at all. But Madam Speaker, what happens in the meantime? There are 786,000 vehicles on the roads of Trinidad and Tobago at this point in time. So we have to have something to deal with the daily ritual of 2 hours from Chaguanas into Port of Spain, and now it's from right down Claxton Bay into Port of Spain. While we were in office, we were about to put in place what you call the dedicated lane for buses and maxi taxis, using at peak hours the shoulder of the road. And also on that lane, we were saying that people with 4 persons in a vehicle will be able to use that faster lane to come into Port of Spain. I don't see any reason why you cannot have flexi time, like we have in the Ministry of Works while I was there. We have flexi time there, and certain people are coming in certain hours and so on. You could have flexi time. Or change the whole way the public service operates. There are a lot of people who will be very willing to do business after 6 o'clock in the evening or after 5 o'clock in the evening. Create a shift where a lot of people who normally come to do business, certain core kinds of business, can do that business after hours. So they don't all have to come into Port of Spain at the same time. The third thing you have to do is to tie decentralization to your traffic. Develop your small towns, make the public facilities available in as many communities as possible, and you therefore decentralize services and don't have everybody running into Port of Spain to get the same thing done. Then you need to get the traffic wardens, the total complement of traffic wardens. So far, about 300 traffic wardens, Minister, have been recruited. You have about 400 more to recruit, and that will assist a lot in dealing with some of the traffic problems. Then there's a matter of the Motor Vehicle Authority. I didn't hear anything in the Minister's speech about the Motor Vehicle Authority. How is the Motor Vehicle Authority going to be implemented? What's going to happen to the legislation that was brought before the Parliament? Are you going to bring back the legislation, even in some other form? What's going to happen to it? I think these are important things if we want to deal with the traffic situation in the country. So those were a couple of quick points I wanted to make on the traffic situation. With respect to projects of the Ministry of Works, I want to wish my colleague, the Minister of Works and Transport and Member for Laventille, all the best. He has a very large plate on his hand, but I think it's an achievable plate. I'm very happy to see that the projects that we had put in train are going to continue. And I didn't see in the budget, though, or maybe I missed it, as to how you are going to go about financing the rest of the highway to Point 14. Whether you're going to use bonds or what have you. Yeah, how it's going to be done. But I think that it's very important that we know how it's going to be done, because that's an important highway in terms of the whole opening up of that southwestern peninsula where there's the highest rates of unemployment. And finally, Madam Speaker, we are in a situation where we're in the country, in the face of falling oil prices, energy prices, we too have had to deal with deficit financing. The country had to be brought back to growth. We found it in negative growth. What we did brought it back to growth, even though it might be 1%. We had the unenviable task of moving the country forward. I think we did so very well. I don't believe today that the people rejected our vision for Trinidad and Tobago. I don't believe the people rejected our vision for Trinidad and Tobago. 340,000 persons supported our vision. They may have rejected us for other reasons, and they may have rejected us for other reasons, but not for our vision. Not for our vision. I want to remind the members of government that in Trinidad and Tobago, the people are not as forgiving of politicians as they used to be. There's a new citizen, and that citizen is a new voter. Perhaps they voted us out in the last election, but they have not voted us out of their minds forever. They have learnt the importance of their vote, and the time will soon come when their eyes will scrutinize the manner of management of you, of the economy. They will compare what they receive from you in the next 5 years, if you last that long, from our administration in terms of what we delivered. And they will vote again. They will vote again. Madam Speaker, unlike the Kamla Prasad-Bisasa administration, when more citizens saw a future in which their children will do better than they did, at this time, given what you have indicated in your budget presentation, too many citizens aren't dreaming about the future. In fact, they are fearing it. Your budget lacked vision, direction, and failed to give confidence to the nation. People were led to believe that since government was the problem, not the solution, just getting government out of the way will be a solution to every economic ill. After 4 weeks, they are rethinking their beliefs and asking whether they allow themselves to be caught up in the euphoria of your propaganda. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for Laventille West.
Thank you very, very warmly, Madam Speaker, for recognizing me. And I thank my colleagues for the very warm welcome to my legs in this, the 2015-16 debate on the appropriation bill. Madam Speaker, I too must congratulate you for your appointment. I feel obliged to do so personally. When I sat here, when I stood actually and saw you sworn in a few days ago, Madam President, I thought, Madam Prime Minister, Speaker, I thought to myself, in that very single act, I thought to myself that in that very single act, the country had signaled that it had returned to dignity and good order yet again. And more so the dignity of this House. It is not too long ago that the people of the country recognized that this House had been severely desecrated. A former member for Tobago East contributed substantially to that. The former government passed the infamous Clause 34. Your ascension to that chair gave Trinidad and Tobago hope again, Madam. Madam Speaker, the people of Trinidad and Tobago have not yet begun to understand that which they averted on September the 7th. If I may be permitted a metaphor, we were shot in the arm, shot in the legs, shot in the back, but we dodged a fatal bullet on September the 7th. And I want to thank God. I want to thank the people of Trinidad and Tobago for their collective wisdom. And I want to thank our leader, the Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, for leading us away from the danger that we face. I want to thank him again for giving us the opportunity, by way of his leadership, to take Trinidad and Tobago in hand and to put us on course again. And I want to specifically thank him for reposing the confidence that he had in me. To have chaired our screening committee caused me to be, to oversee my becoming the Member of Parliament and choosing me to be the Minister of Works and Transport. I thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. The country feels cleaner. It feels lighter. It is indeed happier. And hopes are soaring again. I saw the business community, the chamber, I think it was the energy chamber, in responding to the budget as presented by the Minister of Finance, demonstrating confidence in business again. The Minister of Finance in part called on them, the business community, to join hands with the new government to take Trinidad and Tobago on an upward path again. And they said resoundingly that they are willing to do it. Business confidence is back. Madam Speaker, I want as well to congratulate the Minister of Planning and Development, a quiet storm in all of this. She would have worked along with the Minister of Finance to provide the thoughts and to prepare the budget, a budget that is obviously solid in vision, solid in content, demonstrative of understanding the current social and economic circumstances in which we are put in Trinidad and Tobago. And I congratulate the Minister of Finance for his presentation of the budget. The people of the country are saying, we were able to understand line by line what that Minister of Finance was telling us about. They really appreciated it. The ordinary man out there. And we were deliberately transparent because we knew that we faced some critical times. And as I heard the Minister of Finance deliver his budget, and when he came to an end, I asked myself deeply and seriously, had the member for Caroni Central still been the Minister of Planning and Development? Had the Senator, had Larry Hawaii still been the Minister of Finance? And had the member for Separia still, was she still the Prime Minister? Would we have learned the things that we learned about our economy a few days ago? The answer is a resounding no. They would have continued to smile and tell the country that everything is all right. And there was a reason for them doing that, for telling us everything was all right. Because while they oversaw pilferage and rape of our treasury and rape of our consciences,
48 cents, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member, I would suggest you find another way to put that up.
economic, obscene economic abuse.
They wouldn't object because they don't understand.
They are ashamed of their conduct now. You can see it in their faces. Chogdas has a calypso. Virginia's Alzheimer. I want the people of the country to hear it. It has new meaning today as I look upon them. All of them look related in one way. They gave away free money, free land. Some of their agents.
48-6.
But it is true. It is.
Who give away free land imputing that would work?
Member, Honourable Member for Oropridge East, could you elucidate on the point of order that you...
Ma'am, the member is speaking, is saying they, referring to us, I said, gave away free land, gave away this. That is imputing improper motives. So how you give away?
Member? Member? Member, I'm on my legs. I don't agree. Could you please continue, Honourable Member?
Very warmly. According to his former colleague Mervyn Assam, he's getting jiggery. We used to say jittery, but he says jiggery. They are embarrassed at their awkward ways, but they will have to live with them in this country. The member for Tabaquite who was in his legs a moment ago, in typical UNC form, he began to tell us, we build this, we build that, how much box drain, we do this, we do that. Not one word about value for money. Right. Not one word about process. It is as if these things matter not to them. And yet he's perplexed as to why the country purged itself of them and rejected them. And I tell you this, Madam President, Madam Speaker. I tell you this. I regard it as my, as the old people would say, particularly in Tobago, I regard it as my bounden duty. It is a moral and spiritual duty as long as I have strength and I hold the symbol of the Balizé to do all that is in my power to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago from that bunch for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I owe it to the people of this country. You all are a disaster. And if you had any semblance of shame, you would not have even offered yourselves as candidates in the last election. I thought I had seen the last of you. Certain, and I don't want to speak about former speakers, I really thought I had seen the last of them. But they are so shameless. They're in my face again. Let me share with you very quickly.
Madam Speaker,
let me share with you again, Madam.
48-6. Insulting language.
Member, I do not agree.
The little people out there understand what has happened. I want to spend just a couple moments reminding the people of the country some of the very important things the finance minister said to us. It is as if it escaped the member for Tabaquite. The Minister of Finance at page 6 in his presentation said, and I quote, "Several previous missions from the IMF have conducted their own in-depth review of the economy in their Article 4 consultation reports. I have reviewed these reports, and I have also met with major stakeholder groups since assuming office, who have provided me with their own assessments of the economy as well as their own solutions. We have also benefited from the findings of an IMF team who came at our request just after the elections. The items, the content of the budget that you would have listened to and do not yet understand, though the people do, was guided by professionalism and deep thought and an analysis of our current state of economic affairs. It wasn't by whim. It wasn't UNC. It was done in the interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. He went on to say, many of the proposals from various interest groups, organizations, and experts have a common theme and include implementing a property taxation system. I just heard the member for Tabaquite speaking of the property taxes, though it were a bad thing. The experts, the IMF, commentators locally understand paying tax on property is normal everywhere in the world. There are people in Trinidad who express disaffection at not being able to pay. Their sense of justice says they should for properties owned. And he said as well, untruthfully, that it will return. Our leader, the Prime Minister, took pains during the campaign to tell the country you missed it, that it was always there, you reintroduced it. What we are doing now is no longer, we are now activating it again. We are no longer suspending it, it was always there, member for Tabaquite. It is as if that escaped you. You didn't do that at the level of PhD. In the university in Brazil.
No, the Pacific.
Wherever. It cannot be found today. They went on, the Minister of Finance went on to say, broadening the VAT base. This is one of the themes that came out from all the consultations, including with the IMF. Increasing excise taxes, increasing personal income tax, increasing corporation tax. Those taken together, Madam Speaker, represents more revenue for the people, the government and the people of the country. More taxes mean more revenue. They speak as though tax is a bad thing. The former Prime Minister boasted she never raised tax one day. So they were putting nothing in, all they were doing was taking out. And I want the member for Superior to know in economic terms, in governmental terms, in managing a country terms, that is called stupidity and recklessness. When you only spend without a care about where it is coming from. It is called recklessness, and they are so short-sighted and thin in mental and intellectual application on the particular point that even that escapes them. It is as if there's this cow, healthy, well-fed, they milk it, they cut off a leg while it's alive, they just strip it and they give nothing back. Can't do that. So we have done some of those things. It also suggested eliminating fuel subsidies. reducing other subsidies and transfers, and those two represents cutting back on some of our expenditure. And finally, introducing wage and hiring restraint mechanisms to restrain the call for more and more and more money through labor representatives. That's quite normal. But a sensible government taking into account the entirety of the circumstance will understand what it could do and how far it could go. They, in the last few years, 13%, 14%, and the psychology is very clear. It is not their own. It is somebody else's own. Their agents benefiting greatly from it in terms of the economic abuse that I tried to describe with the R word a while ago. And they give away this run to the airport and give away football money and give away land and give away everything. And the reason psychologically why they give away so is because they know they're taking. So those who get a little bit, I say they,
48.6, please.
I'm on my legs. $48.6, you said, Honorable Member.
48.4 and 48.6.
I rule that he is not in breach of the oath.
Within the last 2 years, Madam Speaker, a pastor told me that one of his colleagues got a contract for his church community. And he's listening as I speak now. I speak after him in the face of God and man. And he got this contract to support his church community. And when the contract was well and truly done, he received a phone call demanding 40%. I thought it was sacrilegious. Yes, from the church. Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Yes. Yes. And that is the sort of thing that we witnessed, that we had to live with in the last 5 years. Bloody and evil behavior. Greed. The Minister of Finance went on to say, even before the elections, and he's speaking on behalf of all of us, because I myself am impressed with his words. I myself, close to the center of gravity as I am, didn't fully understand. I knew things were bad. I was feeling it deep within my Caribbean belly, but I didn't get all the details. The Minister of Finance said, even before the elections, we had reason to believe that our economy had deteriorated significantly over the past year. Indeed, several independent commentators, including Moody's Investors Service, supported our view. However, the previous administration doubted our analysis every occasion they had, insisting that our economy was strong and everything was fine. Instead, the economy was stagnant for the last 5 years. Real output in energy declined in 2015 again, making it the 4th year on the trot. Activity in the non-energy sector also weakened, a loss of momentum in construction, distribution, manufacturing. I'm just reminding you of what the minister said. Total energy exports estimated at $7.5 billion in 2015, a significant decline from $12.7 billion for 2010 to 2014. Trinidad and Tobago's trade balance will be reduced by more than half, from US $4.6 billion in 2014 to US $1.7 billion in 2015. Conversely, in 5 years prior to 2010, there were current account surpluses averaging about 20% of GDP. Those are some of the facts that we had to contend with, and they became more startling as they went along. The Minister of Finance told us that there were arrears accumulated by some state agencies, such as the HDC, where last year the minister with responsibility for that, last Carnival or Christmas, when they know full well things were bad and hiding it from us, so as to mask the behavior of their agents and operatives all over the atmosphere, stealing money, had a big fete, had one of the biggest soca stars performing a Christmas party for the HDC because everything was fine.
Fireworks.
Big arrears, they ran up. The UDCOT, the National Infrastructure Development Company, Nicole, went into that $7.5 billion extension of the highway off budget. And of course, don't have to say much, the minister would say enough about this, the EFCL, where the figures show in 2010, for an example, member for Tabaquite, we Trinidad and Tobago in 2010, we were building an early childhood center for $4 and $5 million. By 2015, under your watch, the same early childhood center being constructed for $11 and $14 million. That's how you managed our affairs. Consistently. And to make matters worse, inside of the EFCL, they had a loan facility with the IDB. And the projects that were done with the IDB loan were done for the $4 and $5 million, as I spoke about a moment ago. But all outside of that, because there were no restrictions and no process, $11 and $14 million a piece. That's what you did to my people. And that's why I don't smile with you. On behalf of them all, I am angry. I feel abused. And it is my bounden duty to keep you out of their face for 20 years. You could go back with your wheel in Belmont.
Now, don't come in Belmont. Don't come in Belmont. Don't come in Belmont.
But one of the worst was yet to come. One of the worst was yet to come. One of the worst, they increased the public debt, everybody knows that. But here the Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker, this is the one that took me. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding billions of dollars of borrowings, tax amnesties, you see? So they gave tax amnesties, they forego the property tax, so-called the old land and building taxes. Billions of dollars they forewent for 5 years. Tax amnesties, extraordinary dividends, sale of assets. The IPO went bad and they're rushing to do another one. High oil and gas prices or cash balances at the Treasury moved from a positive $6.5 billion on May the 24th, 2010. That's what it was. To a negative of $8.5 billion in the middle of September 2015, a reversal of $15 billion. That's what you did. That's Kamla's legacy without stockings. That's your legacy. So you should really be ashamed to come here this morning. Let me give you an example. We put in place the unemployment relief program in many previous incarnations. It is called that today. They criticized it. From the time I came to this parliament in 1995, I grew accustomed to hearing them bad talking URP. They got to government in May 2010. And the same URP that they bad talked for years and accused us of doing things for the corridor and nothing for them. They grabbed on to URP, Madam Speaker. And when URP was supposed to be for the little man in the community, to do a little box drain, to cut a little grass, to fix a little thing in the community, they allowed the big sharks to come into this small pond. Big dark sharks. Their sharks to come into the small pond. And listen to some of what they did. It was only contract after contract after contract. They like contracts. And as I've said before, not with a view of making us better, looking after our well-being, Madam Speaker, but with a view of getting an opportunity to access state money. That's what they did. So listen to some of what happened. In Couva, for an example, they did Couva. Quiet member for Couva South. sit down there watching me and talking about the member for Laventille East. Oh, by the way, let me congratulate my friend. From the time I met him, I had confidence in the young, cool, beautiful Rastafarian brother. I mean, I was proud when I looked on his resume and I saw his degree in engineering from UE and his postgraduate master's degree from, I think it was Southampton, is it?
Yeah.
Huh? Huh? Manchester University out in the UK. And I knew we had a talented, beautiful young man out of Mova in our hands. And he made a nice, cool presentation extemporaneously this morning. I want to congratulate him. Yes. Kuva. And I told the member for Kuva South, he brighter than him, so keep quiet. Kuva.
I will speak whenever.
You could keep quiet. 331 projects. Total estimated cost, Madam Speaker, $107.2 million in Kuva alone. Little URP, shark in the place. 331 projects, $107.2 million. Wow. Understand that?
Kuva region. So the Kuva region.
You could duck and dance how you want. A shark is a shark, especially the deep water one. And if you thought that was bad, madam, if you thought that was bad, yes. If you thought that was bad, let me get you another one. In the Superior region. Yes. And some big fellas walk in here. In the Superior region, I am advised $230 million in the little URP. And that's how they do it. That's how they did it. But more will be said and done about those things at a later stage. Madam Speaker, you will remember, the public is fully aware, that one Stacey Surujrattan, who is no longer in the atmosphere, she was quickly sauntered off to another ministry. She raised the matter with the Prime Minister. Yes, with the then Prime Minister. I have in my possession the famous or infamous, depending on where you stand. If you're on the side of morality, it would be infamous. If you are amoral, or worse, immoral, it would be otherwise. This is from Surujrattan@hotmail.com to kamlapb1@gmail.com, one that I'm familiar with. We heard it another time in this place. Subject QREP interchange. Date Thursday, the 4th of September 2014. Honorable Prime Minister, she writes, I wish to bring to your attention a matter of grave concern regarding the Ministry of Works and NIDCO, which falls under my portfolio, and I'm concerned about it, hence its relevance. The reason I'm writing this email to you is because I know you stand for transparency and accountability. I will put after that sick. It could be SICK too. It could be SICK too. If 2 tins of peas roll from someplace accidentally, don't worry. And I feel the issue has potential to affect you and your government. So this is a junior minister telling the Prime Minister, I feel that this has the potential to affect your government. I would like to draw to your attention the attached letter from the President of NIDCO to the PS Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. And I would like to list some facts as follows. 1. Based on the rules of the Evaluation Committee of NIDCO, the first ranked bidder on this project was Vinci Construction. NIDCO proceeded to enter into negotiations with the first ranked bidder and was able to have the cost reduced from 522 million to 442 million. 2. The revised engineer's estimate was in total 408 million, so that the first ranked bidder was not much higher than this estimate. 3. Cabinet approved the sum of 309 million in 2011 for this project. However, none of the bidders on this project came in at this price or lower. In fact, the second, brackets open, local group led by Lakshmi Singh, close bracket, and third, GLF and Kusal, were 331 and 416 million respectively. So it is very unlikely that the cabinet approved budget price would hold. 4. I was advised that the Minister of Works, and he knows himself, called in the entire board of NIDCO, where he advised verbally that he did not have money to pay 442 million to make the award and that he is sticking to the budget of 309. I am advised that he said to the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure that he said the ministry will not put it in writing and therefore ask the board to take a decision. I do not believe that this was a matter for the minister to discuss with the board, as it is highly inappropriate because no award had yet been made. 5. The board of NIDCO, prior to this intervention, were fine with the position of the letter attached. However, I am now advised that they are pressured to make an award contrary to the first ranked bidder based on the fact that the clients or the ministry's inability to pay. There is a board meeting this morning where the board is to decide what they would do. It would appear that the proposal is to terminate negotiations with the first ranked bidder, Vinci, and engage the second ranked bidder, Lakshmi Singh. I believe there may be legal issues if they go this way. I am very concerned with the appropriateness of this process. It is my view that NIDCO went through an ardent process and have followed tendering procurement rules, and we should be guided by the Evaluation Committee's report. I wish to further state that the years we have worked as Ministry and NIDCO, there has not been one issue of public scandal with NIDCO, which is responsible for major infrastructure projects in this country. However, and listen to this, Madam Speaker, however, we are now seeing articles in the Voice newspaper, I would put floor cloth, attacking our own board members on the award of this project when they have done no wrong. Indeed, it is a very sad thing. And so the letter continues. What happened shortly thereafter is that that minister was removed from that ministry, and further down the road, removed from the UNC's team. She does not appear here today. That is the reward for raising this with the member for Siparia as Prime Minister. And I remember immediately another minister, Gary Griffith. And I remember David West. And I remember Helen, I think, Squires Gomez, an accountant who did an audit out in Prt2. That is the reward you get for standing up for NGC, for standing up for what is right once they were in power. Well, I want the country to hear today, our leader has indicated clearly 1,000 times to all of us that behavior in Trinidad and Tobago in his government, Prt2. And this is why we know that leadership is the key. I'm not saying that my friends on the other side are criminals. I couldn't say that. But I could say that under them, white-collar crime and graft and thievery in this country proliferated. And I see a look of agreement on all of their faces. He spoke a bit about the Ministry of Works. I have some figures here as well, Madam Speaker, just to let the country understand where we were and how they dodged a bullet, a fatal bullet, on September the 7th. With the state of the economy as it is, as we know now, falling from the lips of the Minister of Finance, you can imagine what would have happened if they had spent one more month in our treasury. In termitic fashion, they would have eaten the furniture and all. The cupboard door, they lock everything they was going to take. Let me permit myself another metaphor. It is as if there were big rats in the kitchen. Between 2002 and 2010, Madam Speaker, in respect of the Ministry of Works, number of projects implemented, 3,881. Between 2010 and 2015, 2,319. So between 2002 and 2010, you had substantially more. 1,500 more in the two periods under review. The approximate cost for the 3,881 projects was 3.4 billion TT dollars. But for their 2,319 projects, the cost, as you would not be surprised, over 1 billion more. It is $4.85 billion. And the approximate length of roadway that was dealt with in those projects was 2,245 kilometers. They managed only 1,755. So we did more projects, costing less, and we sorted out far many more roads and kilometers of roads. And I want the public to understand, in my so saying, where we were and the direction we will take this country henceforth. Even in the world of legal fees, I know my colleague on my right, he did a study of this, another demonstration, manifestation of the abuse of which I spoke in my ministry. And I suspect I haven't gotten all the figures because it is a task. And when they were leaving government in some state agencies, we had reports of shredding taking place and cover up, which is their hallmark, their ethos. Legal fees doesn't give me great joy, but in my ministry, I see here one senior counsel called Avery Sinanan, and for the service, and the service he provided is validation legislation to regularize, validate air transport licenses and decision taken by ATLA, policy to be adopted and implemented by government. For that, $500,000 just so. Wow. The well-known Jagdeo Singh, 2 entries. Legal fees for opinion and advice. That is opinion, you know, Madam Speaker. On the proposed action by Ramdash Transport Limited, re-advised Transport Commissioner, re-advised Motor Vehicle Authority project, $670,000 just so. Yes, sir.
An opinion?
A letter?
Yes, sir. Just so, look at here. Yes. Yes. And for those who know the game of Wewe in the old days, they have a thing called Damble. When you come back and hear this one, you come in a lot. You will hear Mr. Young. Jagdeo Singh, legal fees for opinion and advice on the proposed action by Ramdash Transport Limited again, opinion, switching and surveillance, job evaluation, exercise, central tenders board, advice, traffic regulation, 530,000 just so.
So a million.
One man make a million.
Just so. And of course, they came to Parliament with a bill, knowing that there were constitutional complexities and matters that required professional and expert comment. They came to ram it down the throats of my colleagues, ram through with their majority and passed it here. They met stiff opposition in the Senate. That was the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Bill 2014, remember it?
Yes, we vote against
And it flopped.
We vote against that.
Yes, they wanted to ram it down our throat and the country's throat. You know what, Madam Speaker? Mr. Zainul Hossain gave advice in that.
Zainul Hossain?
Yes.
Chairman of the Integrity.
Chairman.
I don't know if it's the same person, but it says Zainul Hossain. $250,000 just so. Just so.
Look at the timing of that.
Just so.
How come Princess Town is saying nothing?
Just so.
How come you ain't saying nothing?
And Madam Speaker, that motor and transport bill, during the campaign, I stood at the high-low car park and in overwhelming admiration saw my then political leader and leader of the opposition
Then.
deal with a matter, prosecute a matter dealing with that very project, where on the 16th of November 2011, that former government got the cabinet to approve a number of measures around it. The matters for the consideration of cabinet was to remove the National Infrastructure Development Company, NIDCO, as the project manager for that MVA building fiasco and to put in its place NIDDEC. I can understand why. We established NIDCO specifically for that. And rather than operate whimsically, let me take the opportunity to inform the country that my Prime Minister has established a committee on national physical infrastructure, which will be chaired by him. It will be populated with the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Works and Transport, and a number of other persons. And we will put together a virtual think tank in this subcommittee of the Cabinet to drive the question of development in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
Not like how they just do it. In my ministry, the Pure program does a great job. A number of young engineers doing great work. We have some things to tweak to make sure that we get value for money. And I promise this country, we will. I promise my leader there will be no wastage in the Ministry of Works. I want the world to know. It is my bounden duty to make sure Trinidad and Tobago henceforth get value for money. So my Prime Minister said. Live by that. We live by that. And in the Pure program, if I might digress briefly, Madam Speaker, when they finished making the list, it didn't even go to the minister. It went to the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, who decide who will get what contract and who wouldn't. Let them doubt that. And if they want to doubt it, go and spin the wheel. He doesn't know anything.
48.6,
He
imputed
doesn't know
improper
anything.
motives.
There's no. Minister remained in the seat.
I rule that there is no breach of the rule.
You better concentrate on EFCL and the audit that is coming. I know you have no hair to lose in it, but you better spoil it. You can't have my hair. This is too beautiful. This is too beautiful. You can't have this. No, you can't have that. No, man, you're crazy. You can't have that. You can't have that. You can't have that. But I was telling you before he was attempting to distract me, Madam Speaker, they went to cabinet as well They went to cabinet as well to give the Minister of Finance the authority to raise $339 million because that was supposed to be the cost of the project. You would recall at that high-low car park, my leader very accurately pointed out, and the bond was advertised, it was done. My leader told the country revealingly that night that the project eventually cost us $1.09 billion.
What?
Yes.
Say that again.
1.09. That means 1,090 million.
Motor vehicle?
Yes.
What?
And we have a big building in Frederick Settlement. I need the time.
Honorable Member, your 45 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 10 more minutes, but you have made a request.
I would like humbly to make a request for 10 more minutes, if it would please you, Madam Speaker. Might I proceed?
Proceed.
Thank you very much. Yes. And while all of that was happening, Winston Dukaran, both the member for Caroni Central, they all sat there like naughty babies, permit me a metaphor, in a wet and soggy diaper, but didn't cry or shout once. They had nothing to say. Sat in the cabinet and saw it happen. Even a baby, when the diaper is soggy and messy, it wiggles and tells the parent something is wrong. They had not a word to say, especially the member for Caroni Central. Not a word. Like a bad baby.
$100 million. That's the procurement.
Yes, and that's the procurement guru. Yes, yes. And you know what? They were supposed to have constructed that major facility and 4 outlying district offices to support it. And you know, $1.09 billion. More than 3 times the cost. That's what they did. And it's far from complete. Let me report to you, Madam Speaker, that we contracted Barrington out of Nova Scotia in Canada. And this whole thing is really about making accurate, reliable records about our motor vehicles on the road available to people wherever they need it. All you need is a kiosk. There are people who operate a business out of a briefcase with a laptop. They went and spent what should have been $45 million, $219 million on that building in Frederick Settlement. We still ain't get the software for the application of this project as yet. We have to go back to the Canadians and no doubt pay more. So we, this government on our behalf, focus rather on the technology and on the software, focus on the building, because that was contract, an opportunity to have fun. And we ain't get the technology yet. And we still ain't get the forward stations yet. And we are now working to make the records reliable in my ministry. And I want to congratulate my permanent secretary. When I went there, I met something in place. So, and I'm confident in my mind it will make the records of the licensing office a problem area where the public perceives corruption is rampant all across the system. It is my intention, and I want the world to know, while I stand here on the authority of my leader, to do something about that. So, let me say a little bit in the 2 minutes I have left. Our manifesto is clear. We published it in fine style from the Radisson for the world to see. I don't have to spend too much time running the pages on it. It is a public document. It is on the website. And it has now been made government policy by Cabinet America. We are intent on continuing the transport, the master plan, which we began in 2008. We will develop the major projects. We will develop the national highway grid. We will complete the San Fernando to Point Fortin, or rather, Mr. Dillon, my colleague from Point Fortin, says it's the Point Fortin to San Fernando highway. We will complete that. We promised a ring road around Chaguanas, one around Sangre Grande. We promised a port in Toco. to make access to Tobago more sensible and easier for our people, we have put together the National Physical Infrastructure Team, and we will embark on those projects. We are in consultation already with the IDB, as we promised during the campaign. We said we support a mass transit system. It has a number of very positive effects, including environmental, including a reduction in the need for the gas subsidy, including improving the well-being and the quality of life of our citizens. Others have done it, and we could, under good leadership. But we said, while that is our plan, we will give ourselves and the country the benefit of objective, knowledgeable, professional advice. The IDB has that expertise. It will look at the sociological and the economic circumstances. And we have said and we maintain that once we pass the IDB test, then we will go ahead with the project. And so it will be. Yes. That is what happened to their government on September the 7th. It fell down and it crashed. And as I close, Madam Speaker, I consider it to be a symbol of Almighty God coming from the desk of the member for Tabaquite.
That's very symbolic.
That is what happened. The government of the UNC, they stole themselves out of office in 2001, and they did it more spectacular in 2015. I promised this country good, solid government and service to the people of this country. I promise that. And the country must note that just about 1 month after we came to office, they have enjoyed, they have experienced 1 month of trauma-free, trouble-free government for the first time in 5 years. 5 years. So I close by making my pledge before God and man. It is my bounden duty to ensure that I, Fitzgerald Hinds, do everything in my God-given power to keep the people of Trinidad and Tobago protected from you for the next 20 years. I thank you very much.
I call on the Honourable Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The member for Laventille West was very colorful, and he is an excellent speaker, and can be quite dramatic in his presentation. I did not mean it as a compliment. I was just making an observation. But I want to begin with the presentation by the Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker, and to say that, you know, the Honorable Minister of Finance today has served this country and this Parliament in many offices. And in a sense, you would say that as Minister of Finance for the first time, he really has attained a high point in his parliamentary career. But I think when he presented the budget, he basically undermined that high point by the manner in which he referred to the opposition in making his first paragraph presentation in the budget presentation. And by politicizing it in that way, and the continuation of the presentation here by the member for Laventille West, we begin to see that there is a gap between the talk and the work, Madam Speaker. So, for instance, the member for Laventille West, after the Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Leader of the Opposition spoke this morning, what she did was she responded to the Minister of Finance, and she very clinically went through the issues, made a distinction between the facts and the misinformation. And what she showed by comparison with real numbers from real documents that are official was that there was a lot of confusion and a lack of clarity in the information provided by the Minister of Finance. And what the member of Laventille West did was to simply come afterwards and read from what was clinically addressed by the leader of the opposition and reassert those positions, and then begin his illustration and example approach to reinforce the fact of the negative picture that they had painted of the opposition then government in office for many of the 5 years that we were in office. So, for instance, he read from a letter by the junior Minister of Works at the time, writing to the then Prime Minister. But what he did not say in all the letter was that the project was never executed.
So why should get fired?
The project was never executed at all. And when you read the letter, what the letter is basically saying is that the minister tried to get the project for a lower price, not a higher price. So I think that we have to take what the member for Laventille West said with a great grain of salt, notwithstanding the color and the theatrics. And we need to understand that there is an agenda here. And what we are debating is the budget presentation for the period 2015-2016. We are not debating here, although it is legitimate to raise the issues having to do with the government performance over the last 5 years. And therefore, I would like to address a few issues in this presentation. One, I want to bring to the Parliament some of the issues my constituents have raised with me, because they met with me and they have views. They are citizens of the country, and they have an interest in what is happening in the Parliament and in the government and in the country at large. I do not intend to spend any inordinate amount of time defending the last 5 years. Our record speaks. Our record speaks on performance, and our delivery is clear, it is visible, and therefore I do not intend to defend anything about the last 5 years. I want to say a few words about energy, and I want to deal a little bit with this substance of the budget statement itself. I want to address the issue of the mood of the country, which I interpret to be very different. And I want to say a word about the tone of this government now in office for just over a month. And then I want to close on one matter related to my constituency. Madam Speaker, what is a representative democracy if the views of those who gave you the mandate to be their representative are not taken into account? So that on Wednesday of this week, some of my constituents talked to me about their thoughts and feelings on the budget, and I have the notes of their meetings, and I took the time to pick out not all, because they raise many issues, Madam Speaker. They raise many issues, but I want to raise some of their concerns as they themselves articulated it. They wanted to know why $10 billion, close to 1/6 of the total budget, was being spent on national security, and how we would know that we got the same value for money that the member for Laventille West talked about, how we would get the value for the $10 million, and how we would know that we got it. And so I am asking that question on their behalf to the Minister of National Security. They wanted to know if any infrastructure projects will be done in Caroni Central and in Central Trinidad, and whether these will be meaningful, and whether the people of Caroni Central will get jobs, and whether the people of Central Trinidad will get jobs, and whether small contractors, as they generally are in those areas, are going to be taken into account. And so I am asking the Minister of Works and the Minister of Rural Development and the Minister of Agriculture if they would answer that question for my constituents. They wanted to know if changing the tax regime for the oil and gas companies will result in more or less investment in the energy sector. And they wanted to know how Trinidad and Tobago would benefit from such decisions. I therefore, on their behalf, refer that question to the Minister of Energy for response. My constituents were decidedly against a rapid rail, because what they understood a rapid rail to be, as articulated, was that it was a speed train, and they wanted to know if it would uproot their communities, whether it would disturb their homes and families, whether it would cause other problems not yet known because of lack of clarity on what is meant by a rapid rail. And they did not want the government to take the position of a bulldozer and to put the rapid rail on track by bulldozing their way in the public space. And so I asked the minister responsible for transport and the Minister of Finance to give some clarity on this matter, and also to explain whether the decision on a rapid rail has anything to do as well, because they raised that, with a land racket involving party financiers, which is also a concern of my constituents. My constituents wanted to know what the new structure of local government, with the central local government ministry now abolished and a new rural development ministry established. They wanted to know what this would mean for them. They wanted to know if it would have powers equivalent to the THA. They wanted to know, would each local government entity get an agreed budgetary allocation? They wanted to know how this would be determined. They wanted to know also whether local government would be able to raise taxes They wanted to know what would be the extent of the transfer of power from central government to local government. So, on behalf of my constituents, I asked these questions to the Minister of Rural Development, and I await the response. The constituents of Caroni Central became especially concerned about those questions on the future of local government when they learned from their 3 councillors who were present at the meeting with me, Mr. Anil Baliram, Ms. Sandra Abdul, and Mr. Yeah. No, I forgot. Mr. Leon. The third councillor, that the breakdown of the budgetary allocations for 2016 left each member of the Couva Tabaquite Corporation with $285,000 to build roads, $280,000 to look after drainage, and $1 million to be divided by 14 councillors and aldermen to look after recreation facilities. They wanted to know that when they heard those numbers, and the other councillor, whose name I forgot, was Neil Francis. Now, there are over 100 recreational facilities in the Couva Talparo region, which, by the way, and member for Laventille West was talking about the Couva region in terms of the number of projects. And I want to tell him that the Couva region is the size of the island nation of Barbados. Okay?
Only did everything by size.
I would just like to be able to make my presentation, if you do not mind. The constituents of Caroni Central were entirely opposed to the Revenue Authority because they felt that if not established with due care and attention, a revenue authority can become arbitrary in pursuit of its mandate and can be turned into a political football. So maybe the Minister of Finance would want to consider what assurance he is prepared to give that a new revenue authority will not act arbitrarily and operate as an instrument of the political directorate. Now, some of these concerns I am also concerned about. These are the legitimate concerns of my constituents as articulated by them, and I'm selling them as they were given to me. But I want to say that some of these concerns are also concerns of mine as a member of parliament in this parliament, and I will elaborate a little bit later on as I go. Now, moreover, some of my constituents wanted to know whether the property tax will lead to the entrenchment of an elite core of a monopoly of property valuators. My constituents also wanted to know whether there will not just be a base rate, but also a cap. They were very clear that the Minister of Finance said that he would be back to 2009 existing rates. But they wanted to know what would be the limit of the tax and what is the basis on which such a tax will be calculated to ensure equity and fairness. And I want to raise these issues because they are important issues to the citizens of the country, not just for my constituents. I look forward to a response on these matters from the Minister of Finance because many of my constituents will be listening. My constituents of Caroni Central express worry about retrenchment and firings in the state enterprises and agencies. And they ask whether we will continue to have political firings over the course of the year, and whether rising unemployment will become a feature in the society, and whether rising unemployment will not perhaps lead to more crime in the society. These are people living in communities, living in villages. This is a very close-knit community, but they are well connected all over the country in terms of their family structures. And these are legitimate and reasonable questions to be asked by citizens in the country about things that are happening here in Port of Spain. Citizens in Caroni Central were concerned about what would happen to the recently commissioned Children's Hospital, which happens to be in their constituency. And they were concerned about crime, they were concerned about land tenure, they were concerned about how quickly and fairly government will move to regularize tenure for them. These are some of the legitimate concerns of the citizens of Caroni Central. The citizens of Caroni Central also expressed concern about a rise in the cost of living. And they wanted to know how many of the zero-rated items would now be subject to 12.5% VAT. And what would be the impact of increased fuel costs together with the increase in VAT on zero-rated items currently. So I look forward to responses on these matters from the various ministers, the relevant ones, so that citizens of Caroni Central and elsewhere can understand really what is the impact of the budget. The member for Laventille West said that people were very clear, that they understood everything, and that they understood we were a bad and corrupt government, and now they had gotten good government. So I want these things, these questions that I have asked, because of the questions on the minds of ordinary citizens, I want some of these questions to be answered with clarity. There are other issues, but these few that I have mentioned, I wish to highlight. They came straight from the people, and they represent genuine and legitimate concerns of ordinary citizens in the country. I have my own thoughts on some of these issues, and I might share them later depending on how much time I have. But how I manage my time, I guess, Madam Speaker. But having presented these concerns of my constituents, and having asked for answers on their behalf from the relevant ministers, I want to state my own approach in this budget debate. The government in office, members on the other side, had 4 weeks to present a budget. I appreciate that, and I understand it. Preparation would have been done, and options would have been identified. But the Minister of Finance had 4 weeks to consider policy choices with his colleagues and to address political considerations. And now we are where we are today, which is the budget has been presented and we are now engaged in debate. I do not intend to attack the budget, and it is not my responsibility to praise it. Neither am I going to give much of my time, to spend any of my time reviewing what has happened over the last 5 years. That may come up from time to time over the parliamentary life, and I will speak to any issues that I consider important. But I want to simply say that many of the things said in the budget statement are not, in fact, true. They are basically a contextual manipulation of information and figures and numbers. Many things said by the then opposition in the last parliament when we were in government are not in fact true. And many things said outside of Parliament are calculated and have been calculated to misinform. But be that as it may, we are here now. You are the government. We are the opposition. And therefore, what I want to do is to take a critical look at the budget and make some constructive suggestions in what we all know is a challenging situation and a hard place to be in economic and financial terms. That is not because of anything the last government did. That is not anything that you did in the last month. That is because you have a global financial crisis that has not settled down since 2008. That is because you have an energy challenge with the rise of the importance of shale gas and a war going on in the petroleum sector that has hit every element of energy, including all commodity prices in the world, and has had a significant negative impact on economic growth in the world system. On the other side, and the leader of the opposition articulated what was happening in China, what was happening in Europe, what is happening in Brazil at the present time, what is happening all over the world. That is the end result of that. Not only is there this major shift in the energy economy and the energy markets and the commodity markets itself, but you have a total global shift of the production system in the world, a shift in the approach to trade in the world, and the world is going through a tremendous transformation globally from finance to everything else. And that has geopolitical implications for the way the world order is likely to pan out. Recently, the IMF has been talking about challenges in the developing world and the emerging world, not in the settled countries, not in the more advanced economies, which already have their problems. Look at the problems in Europe, in which basically a zero interest rate economy is the dominant form of existence with an influx of immigrants from everywhere. Look at the difference in asymmetry in terms of what is going on in policy, that's to say monetary policy in the United States where interest rates are going up, and monetary policy in Europe, for instance, where it is kept at zero. So all of these things are bound to have an impact on us. And really, the strategy for us is really the extent to which we can work within a neighborhood and the extent through which working within a neighborhood can insulate us from the hardest effects of the rest of the global economy. And that is not easy to navigate. Now, we are in this crisis principally because the production levels of oil and gas has also been impacted locally, and because of the dramatic drop in the price of oil and all commodities, and we are in that market and it has affected us. And also the challenges with gas and the commodity market, all of these things are affecting us. So it is not reasonable and right to give the population the impression that what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago today is because of something the People's Partnership did. That is wrong. It is untrue. It is not fair. It is because we are in the midst of a global crisis which hit us very hard in energy terms in January 2015 this year. Now, we recognize that the situation economically is tough. We recognize that the financial situation is tough. And any government in October 2015 would have had to face this challenge. It happens to be you, but it could have been us. And we were prepared for it. And we told And you accuse us of everything, but I want to tell you on page 79 of the manifesto we presented to this country, we headlined it, Meeting the Challenges of Reduced Energy Prices. And we talked about it. And we said, I won't read the whole thing, we will take the necessary steps to increase oil production by offering lease of operatorships to small companies and sole operators, to those who can seize profitable opportunities to produce oil and natural gas. And I see on the natural gas side, the Minister of Finance has taken a position that is similar, but he has not said anything about oil. Secondly, we will make appropriate changes in the fiscal regime involving suppliers, National Gas Company, NGC, and downstream operators to ensure an increase in production and consequently an increase in supply and availability of gas. And I see that that is one of the things presented in the budget statement by the Minister of Finance. Moreover, in our September 2015 budget, we were talking about the budget we will present. We will rule out any prices rises in the global prices of oil, natural gas, and other commodities, and budget at the reduced assumptions for the January price of oil and gas, which we made in January, which is $45, which you have done, and $225 we suggested. You have gone to $275. I think it is too high. But I am not an expert in these matters, and you cannot really know. And time will tell whether, in fact, you are correct or not. Now, we took a different approach on the question of subsidies. We said we will also immediately peg all subsidies at the pump at the $45 level, which meant that as long as oil was at the $45 level or less, nobody would pay any more at the pump. But once it began to rise, people will pay, and the government would not continue the subsidy. You have taken a 15% approach, whatever the price. I just want to say that there is a difference in approach as far as that is concerned. I want to say that what we said is that we will instruct all state enterprises to address waste and cost duplication, to strengthen operational efficiencies and to identify slack in their organizations, to positively address productivity and competitiveness. You have been silent on this matter, except to say that you are going to sell assets without identifying what assets you are going to sell. But there is nothing that has been said that has to do with the productivity and competitiveness of the state sector, of living within their means, and of their capacity to make a profit. These initiatives will begin the process of Trinidad and Tobago living within its means as we address the important issues of revenue, expenditure, gas supply to the national economy, and the management of the deficit. The completion of the World Bank study addressing duplication, overlap, and wastage in the social welfare support sector will also make that sector more efficient. The stimulation of the economy to propel growth through investment, expansion of the private sector, increasing good jobs, and action on some of our flagship projects in the coming fiscal year, all of which we said we would do public-private, and we identified 10 of them, will add bounds to the economy and positively affect the revenue side. So our approach to the budget was that we had to move the country to living within our means. We had to have a containment effect on the entire management of the state-controlled side of the economy. There were certain things that we were going to do to manage the subsidy side, having to do with the energy sector and the lowering of prices in the global market. But we had a growth side to the economic management. Because if you only address the issue of austerity, if you only address the issue of cutting costs and you do not address the issue of growth in the economy, you're going to have a problem. And the member for Laventille West read out the things that the IMF prescriptions indicated by way of advice, and I want to read them out again from the presentation by the Minister of Finance in his presentation. Implementing a property tax which costs the taxpayer. Broadening the vast base, which means that zero-rated items are now going to come into additional costs for the citizen. Increasing excise tax. Increasing corporation tax, eliminating the fuel subsidies, reducing other subsidies and transfers, and introducing wage and hiring restraint mechanisms. That is to say, sending people home, cutting their pay, not raising their pay, etc. All of these things are what are known as austerity measures. Those are the measures that led to the escalation of the crisis in Greece. Those are the measures, those are the things which led to the Greek crisis, creating a crisis in Europe. Those are the things which led as well to crises having to do with immigration. Because when things get hard in one country, people begin to move. And I want to say to you that there has to be a knowledge of this. It is important to know what the austerities option would be. It is important to know what the choices are going to be. But it is the task of government to be judicious, to be balanced, to be fair, to be equitable, and to understand what ultimately the impact of these things are going to be. And I want to say that unless you have a partner element of budgetary strategy over the next 5 years that have to do with growth and development in the economy, all you are going to see is a shrinking pie and a contracting economy and hardship on the population. And that is what I am concerned about because of the lack of philosophical clarity, which is abundant in the presentation of this budget statement. And I think that is what we need to be concerned about as a country. And I think that is reflected without my constituents being able to articulate it in that way by some of the concerns that they raised with me on Wednesday afternoon. And I think that lack of clarity will translate into the concerns by citizens about things that really affect them. Now, as we speak, I want to say in the energy sector, I want to speak with that because this is important for us. And the crisis is indeed an energy crisis, although I want to warn, I want to caution that the real crisis that is likely to hit, even with this energy crisis, is a financial crisis that does not originate here. It is already abroad. It is already there. It exists in the global system. Anybody who has eyes to see will understand what is happening globally. And therefore, we may very well find ourselves with a situation in which we not only have an energy crisis, but we also have a global financial crisis as well. And I want to say that as we speak, and let me focus on the energy element, there are onshore companies in Trinidad and Tobago that are beginning to send their workers home. I don't want to name those companies. There are at least 2 of them in the country. But I want to say that that is happening. It is a fact of life because the energy situation for some of these companies is not as it was 6 months, 8 months, 10 months ago. So we need to do something to stabilize the energy sector now in the current situation. And it is no good talking about how it declined over the last 5 years. What you have to do is to do something now to arrest further decline and to create a situation in which you can have stability and a stabilized energy sector, even under these conditions and under these prices in the country. For instance, there is another matter that I want to raise, which might be part of the solution. BP is talking through and working through an investment in technology that will make a substantial difference in Atlantic LNG. These two companies are talking. And the technology involves a deep suction capability for stranded pools of gas which cannot now be recovered. Now, if this matter can be resolved to a country's benefit, and the government, and in order to do this, it does require government intervention. It needs to engage all the stakeholders through a combination of both moral suasion and facilitation, because increased gas capture and production is important. And we need more gas before 2017 and 2018, because the demand is outstripping supply, and that is the problem of gas shortage in the country. And therefore, there is something that can be done now, is what I'm saying, and that there is a role for government in this process. So don't blame the People's Partnership government. Get proactive, get involved, stabilize the energy sector, increase the gas production by getting this new technology that can capture stranded pools of gas that cannot now be recovered. I want to say the lease operator farm-outs are a very important part of the development process, both for the country and for the energy sector, whether oil or gas. Because what it means is that at lower prices, where big companies, where it does not make sense for big companies to be involved in production, small people, little people, individuals, and small companies can become involved and increase production that can address the issue of shortage between now and 2017, which is a reality. So I want to say that there are other options for the country. We started in our time, beginning with what you had done in the last administration, the discussion with Venezuela over the Manatee Field. And that was advanced very far by the government of Trinidad and Tobago under our watch, under the watch of Kamala Persad-Bissessar, former Prime Minister of this country. She took a deep and direct interest in this matter, and it got to the point where it was virtually agreed that the gas from Venezuela would come through the NGC in Trinidad and Tobago. That is an opportunity to deal with 2017. It is an opportunity to deal with shortage now. It is an opportunity to deal with increased production. It is an opportunity to deal with increased income. And therefore, I want to say that these are realities of Trinidad and Tobago which we can address and which it is within this government's domain to address. The one good thing that you did is that you continued the discussions with the Venezuelan government, and that should continue, and we should bring the gas home to Trinidad and Tobago, because this is our country and we should secure our citizens, we should develop our country, and therefore you should take the necessary steps as the government to make that happen, because if we were in government, we would do it. I see that you have engaged the Prime Minister of Guyana. That is also an important thing for the future. Our Honorable Prime Minister, our Leader of the Opposition, then Honorable Prime Minister, engaged the President of Guyana when he became President in CARICOM in Barbados. She asked him to come to Trinidad, which he did, and those discussions were beginning, and there were 4 areas that we were going to pursue. For the future, the engagement of Guyana is important. having to do with the future production of oil and possibly gas in that particular country. So those are things that can be done. We had engaged the IDB in what was known, together with CARICOM, as the Energy Fund for Caribbean Sustainability. That is a fund to which the IDB has already pledged $600 million, to which the CDB has already pledged $120 million. And as the then Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, had given a pledge to raise up to $1 billion to make this possible. This has tremendous implications for Trinidad and Tobago when production of gas becomes a possibility, becomes an option in 2017 and 18, given what I'm talking about with the Manatee fields, given what is possible with Guyana, because it has implications for what happens in the rest of the region and Trinidad and Tobago's position in the region and the world as an energy-producing country. And those are things that we can do. I do not want to ignore and neglect, and I hope that this government will not ignore and neglect the fact that there is a major project involving Mitsubishi, Neil and Massey, and NGC that has serious implications for downstreaming in this country and has the capacity to create new and cleaner fuels based on natural gas feedstock. And therefore, I want not only that, but it has serious implications for the development of other elements of manufacturing in the country. And I want to say that these are all on the table. All the bad things you say the government of Trinidad and Tobago did before September 7, 2015, these are all our handiworks, which we are passing on to you as the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So make use of it in the interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Do not pretend that you came with an empty treasury and you cannot do anything in Trinidad and Tobago. There is lots to do. I want to say that investment in deep water and deep water drilling was really started by this government. The former Minister of Energy was a key player in that. There had been a hiatus for almost a decade, and in fact, he did that, and our approach to the tax write-offs is what today makes the Juniper field exploration possible. I want to say that. Had we not changed the regime, had we not created another regime of tax incentives, that Juniper project would have been dead. If you think what I am saying is not true, go on the website and look at all the projects of BP around the world that they have closed down.
Honorable Member.
Yes.
Your 45 minutes is up. Do you intend to take advantage of the additional 10 minutes?
I would like to, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Now, had that not been done, and if you look at the website, you will see how many projects have been closed down because the cost of doing the projects is too high. But with the tax breaks that we gave them, it was possible to do this, and that is why that has a promise of delivery of gas at some point if we were to find it. So you check the BP shutdowns and you'll see. But there's one more thing to do, and that is the SPT. Action needs to be taken on the supplementary petroleum tax, and it has to be taken sooner rather than later. That tax was initiated when the price of oil was 100 US plus, and the budget was pegged at that time at $80. Now the price is likely to be between 40 and 70 over the next few years, and this for an extended period, and our budget price is pegged at 45 US. And therefore it is important to address the SPT if we are to deal with the issue of production and supply, and if we are to encourage investments in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I said I would deal with the substance of the budget itself, and I want to agree with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition that this is not a serious budget. It is indeed a half measure, and it is a holding budget. It seems that the real budget will come in the midterm review in March 2016, perhaps with the help of the IMF, since the member for Laventille West is so taken in by these wonderful prescriptions of the IMF. But that is a choice that the new government will have to make. The main reason that I say that it is not a serious budget is because the revenue targets are not realistic, and I want to emphasize that. The revenue targets are not realistic. There is no way that the projection in this budget to double VAT intake in 1 year, in which declining activity is a stark reality in Trinidad and Tobago, is at least is going to be realizable. It is not possible. The revenue targets are not attainable. If a CEO took a budget to his board that was based on high expenditure and a revenue number pulled out of a hat, he or she would be sent back to do the sums, or he or she would be fired for incompetence. If he went to a bank with a business plan, the CEO would be sent out of the office. He wouldn't be taken seriously. If you have a high expenditure figure and the sums for your revenue intake are unrealistic, they are not going to take you seriously, because everything depends on your ability to earn the revenue. I give the Minister of Finance the benefit of the doubt that he knows that his budget is unrealistic now, that the revenue size is unrealizable. He knows that too, but he is banking on the fact that the adjustments will be made in March 2016 when a more realistic budget will be presented. And that really makes this budget untenable as it is now. It is unrealistic in its revenue assumptions. There is no way that the revenue can be realized, and therefore you're going to have a major challenge. And that has nothing to do with the People's Partnership and their tenure in the last 5 years. When we look carefully at the budget, we note that there is a promise to make some adjustments to gate and to some welfare measures on the basis of consultations. We wait to see what the government will do, because those are very important policy decisions. Our government was going to use the $12 billion due from CLICO to pay down debt. Your government seems committed to use it for budgetary support. Again, that is your choice. We wait to see how these things will unfold. Now, our government, as any government, would have made mistakes in the 5 years, and we acknowledge that we made mistakes, but the Honorable Leader of the Opposition said, as she said, we paid the price at the polls, and you are now the government in charge. When we were in government, you, as opposition, assaulted us on good governance issues. This in spite of the fact that we instituted a regime of greater parliamentary accountability. This in spite of the fact that we passed the procurement legislation and partially proclaimed it. This in spite of the this in spite of irresponsibility on the part of the government then in opposition. We passed the Planning and Facilitation of Development Bill. We strengthened FIU legislation to address white-collar crime. We reintroduced the CEC requirement for quarrying operators in this country. And we did what was required to ensure compliance with EITI standards globally. We did all of this. And yet, you successfully propagandize against the People's Partnership government on the issue of good governance. And so you are in government now. But you are in government now, and good governance is now required of you. And in your government's first opportunity to set the tone for governance through the budget statement in 2016, you did not start very well. On the issue of governance, I say this to this honorable House and to the citizens of this country. that this government has fallen woefully short, even in these short 1 month. Let us take the issue of the increase in stipends for OJTs. I am happy for the OJTs. They deserve it. But are they not on temporary contracts? The reason I ask this is because $500 million in the budget has been put aside to hire 20 graduates each in 23 ministries. Now, from my point of view, and knowing everything I know about past administrations of which you were part, this, it seems to me, is going to be used as to build a partisan political cadre that is supported by the state. It seems to me that you are spending $500 million of taxpayers' money, $500 million, of taxpayers' money as a political act. The OJT program, the OJT is not 55, it's $500,000. The OJT program and the ministerial recruitment program, I want to say this, and this is the pertinent point. The OJT program and the ministerial recruitment program are contradictory. I call for two things to be done to ensure transparency and to support meritocratic recruitment practices if this program is implemented. Either you absorb the OJTs as knowledge workers into permanent employment in the ministries, and secondly, that you start among the OJTs with returning national scholars, which would mean bringing the brightest and the best into the public service rather than political appointees. And I make that statement seriously because it is important for the tone of government going forward. Good governance, we will also demand of you, and we are going to demand it issue by issue. Trinidad and Tobago changed their government on September 7, 2015. 1/3 of the electorate did not vote, 1/3 voted for you, and 1/3 voted for us. What the country is looking for is coherence, it is looking for clarity, and it is looking for a sense of assurance that whatever the situation, we have a command of things, we will be judicious, and we will know and that we know what we are doing. The budget as presented by the Minister of Finance does not give us that comfort. But I want to draw attention to certain things that have to do with the tone and disposition of the government. Like the member for Tabaquite, I became uneasy because of the statement by the leader of government business that they were now in charge of the parliament. I want to caution the government on any attempt at executive domination of this.
Central, can I just ask you to wrap up? You are out of time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to caution the government on any attempt at executive domination of this 11th Parliament. We did a lot in our time as government to open up the Parliament and to strengthen it as an institution. I will wrap up by saying that we have seen. Honorable Speaker, do I have your protection for a minute?
I would allow you, Honorable Member for Caroni Central, exactly 3 seconds to bring your contribution to an end.
I can't do it in seconds. Can you?
Honorable Member, you have already had a minute over time. So it is just, rather than to stop you abruptly, it is just to give you 3 seconds to wrap up.
Did you say thank you?
1,
2, 3.
Some order. The 3 seconds begin now.
Madam Speaker, what I would like to say is that the tone of this government, I cannot operate in this condition.
Thank you.
Could we have some order so that I can have you heard in 3 minutes, 3 seconds, 3 seconds, and that is it. So it's basically to say your contribution is at an end.
The tone of this government is not right, and I want to alert the Parliament and the country that this tone cannot be allowed to continue.
The Honourable Member for Laventille.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to address this Honourable House, and I assure you that we on this side will abide strictly by the time restraints. Acknowledge that this is my maiden contribution, and I wish to join with other members in Parliament in offering you my heartfelt congratulations on your election as the presiding officer of this House. I also wish to congratulate the Honourable Minister of Finance on his sterling presentation of this country's 2015 to 2016 budget. It should be noted that the calling of the 2015 elections so close to the end of the fiscal year did not afford the Minister of Finance the time one would normally expect to oversee the preparation of such an important document. That the Minister was able to do so with such finesse speaks volumes to both to his ability and the foresight of the Honourable Prime Minister in entrusting the exacting portfolio of Minister of Finance to him. Madam Speaker, there's a local saying that class is class while form is only temporary, and the Minister certainly demonstrated that he is a class act. Before I delve into the substance of my presentation, it would be remiss of me.
Could we have a little silence to allow the Honourable Member for Brea to make her maiden contribution in silence?
Thank you. Before I delve into the substance of my presentation, it would be remiss of me if during my first contribution in this chamber that I did not publicly thank the people of Brea who overwhelmingly supported me at the election, particularly the large turnout of youth voters for the first time in the history of the constituency. I also wish to thank the Honourable Prime Minister for his show of confidence expressed in me with my appointment as Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. Madam Speaker, the portfolio of Minister of Energy and Energy Industries is a very important one as the energy sector remains pivotal to the growth and development of this country. As a consequence, I feel honored to have been chosen for the task, yet humbled to have been given this awesome responsibility. Madam Speaker, coming on the heels of the contribution from the member for Caroni Central, and listening to him talk about the meeting he had last Wednesday with his constituents, just want to recommend to him that perhaps he can have a long conversation with Glenn Rambachan Singh, the former MP, so that he can help demystify some of the concerns of his constituents. But now to the substance of my presentation. Madam Speaker, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension the energy sector, had been under the control of the members of the opposite side for the past 5 years. During that time, members on this side had been fulfilling their role as a government in waiting by analyzing the economy and laying the policy groundwork for its future development. The policy positions agreed upon have been well articulated in our manifesto, which was so beautifully published and is available online. And it is on those stated prescriptions that I will seek to build upon and provide the guidelines for the way forward in the energy sector. Madam Speaker, having made that citation, I will, however, spend a few moments recapping some of the salient issues pertaining to the energy sector as raised by the Minister of Finance during his presentation. The Minister noted the following, and you'll forgive me because I'm quoting from what he spoke. Since 2008, when the sector's contribution to GDP achieved a high of 50.8%, the sector's contribution to growth has been on the decline, reaching a low of 37.2% in 2014. During the last 5 years, fiscal incentives were provided for the energy sector. However, there were no specific incentives that targeted the development of small and marginal gas fields. The stark reality is that oil and gas production has been on a steady decline since 2010. Specifically, oil and condensate production has fallen from 100,000 barrels a day in 2010 to 80,000 barrels a day in 2015, a decrease of some 20%. In August 2015, production low of 75,238 barrels per day is of particular concern. We must therefore take decisive action in our energy sector to reverse the stagnation and decline of the last 5 years. We cannot sit idly by and allow production to decline and revenues to fall. We will engage all energy stakeholders, upstream, midstream, and downstream, in meaningful consultation to arrive at consensus on the way forward. The pursuit of a focused renewable energy program is also high on our agenda. In particular, the practical use of solar and wind energy within the domestic and commercial sectors will be important strategies in extending the life of our invaluable petroleum resources and reducing our carbon footprint. We will support the present move to compress natural gas in light of its environmental benefits and the positive impact on reducing the subsidy on transportation fuels. The majority of the issues raised by the Minister of Finance in his analysis paint a worrisome picture of the present state of the energy sector. However, there is yet hope for us. As I stated earlier, we on this side have been analyzing the situation and, in keeping with our diagnosis, have come up with clear prescriptions for the way forward. These prescriptions are to be found in our manifesto, on which we based our campaign in the lead-up to the election. As you are well aware, the manifesto has now been adopted as official government policy, has been laid in cabinet, and the manifesto asserts the statistical truism that the energy sector continues to be the main driver of the Trinidad and Tobago economy, contributing 50% of our GDP and almost 60% of government revenues. It has been plain to see by any rational or even casual observer that over the last 5 years, the management of the energy sector has been a colossal failure. Through bungling incompetence on the part of the UNC-led government, we have lost 25% of our local oil production since 2010. And the sector has been characterized by natural gas production shortfalls and extremely poor decision-making. In addition, as you are well aware, the cancellation and abandonment of several projects and the violation of contractual agreements, Alutron comes to mind, all of which were geared to support the continued growth and expansion of our energy sector, have created a very difficult situation which we must now confront head-on and rectify as quickly as possible. Madam Speaker, I can speak from first-hand experience on the collapse of hope for a brighter future faced by members of the constituency of Brea, who have chosen me to be their representative. It is no secret that a major innovative project earmarked to be located in my constituency was cancelled. Wow. Unceremoniously at that. Despite the promise of 1,500 jobs during the construction phase, 1,000 permanent jobs, 85 OJTs had already been chosen and were being trained for work in the plant. And this was unceremoniously cancelled by the previous government. And only recently Just earlier this year, they turned the sword on all. Project was unceremoniously cancelled during their first year in office, and only in the very dying months of the administration, they gave consideration to an alternative project. Madam Speaker, that decision is but one example that cries out for the need of us as a government and people to adhere to another of our policy prescriptions, which urges us to rebuild our reputation for integrity, transparency, and respect for signed contracts and agreements. I do not need to go into the details of the lengthy arbitration and the cost involved in their cancelling of these contracts without any just cause. We now as a government have to reverse this destructive trend. Our policy position advocates that we must now recreate partnerships and innovations that foster self-reliance and a resilient energy sector through an ethical, efficient, and evolving regulatory framework. Madam Speaker, I do not propose to spend my short speaking time dealing with the shortcomings of the former regime. The population has already weighed their performance in the balance and found it to be woefully lacking. I propose, however, to show the basis and validity of our policy positions from the context of the developments which have been taking place in the international energy arena and the expectations of the future. Madam Speaker, I recognize that those on the other side are now without their former Minister of Energy. So I recognize that they may be lacking in the expertise to fully analyze the energy sector. So as a result, I will now present what I consider a truncated overview of the sector. Given the time constraints, I will pay particular attention to the energy products which are associated with this country and which are traded in the international marketplace. Demand for crude oil is influenced by economic growth rate expectations, which, from the various forecasts, are being revised downwards, with the exception of India, of course. The IMF foresees slower growth in emerging markets and developing economies, while growth in advanced economies is expected to increase, if only gradually. OPEC projects economic growth for both 2015 and 2016 has been lower than the previous report at 3.1% and 3.4% respectively, with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development economies expected to expand by 2% in 2015 and 2.1% in 2016. China's forecast was reduced to 0.1%, but by 0.1% to 6.8% for this year, and at 6.4% for 2016, due to the slowdown which was exacerbated by the devaluation of the renminbi and the contraction of the manufacturing sector. Brazil and Russia remain weak, and both countries are expected to experience a recession in 2015. On the other hand, healthy growth trends are expected in India, as that economy is expected to grow at a rate of 7.4% in 2015 and 7.6% in 2016. Major drivers of global crude oil consumption include Latin America, China, and countries of the OECD. OPEC projects world oil demand growth in 2015 at 1.4 million barrels a day. This is due to a higher than expected performance by OECD Americas and Europe in the first half of 2015. However, due to slower economic momentum in Latin America and China, world oil demand growth is projected to increase by 1.29 million barrels a day in 2016, from 92.7 million barrels a day in 2015 to 98.4 million barrels a day in 2016. On the production side, the International Energy Agency indicates that despite recent falling off in supply in OPEC countries, production still averaged higher than the same period last year. On the other hand, non-OPEC production was 35,000 barrels lower at 58.16 million barrels a day. This was attributable to cuts in U.S. production, a reduction in North Sea supply caused by seasonal maintenance, and the EIA's adjustments in its method of estimating U.S. crude oil production. EIA forecasts that U.S. production, which was the driver of non-OPEC growth in 2014, is projected to decline, while production growth in other non-OPEC countries is expected to be modest. As a result, overall production growth is forecasted to remain relatively flat in 2016. OPEC's crude oil production is expected to increase to an average 0.8 million barrels a day in 2015, with Iraq being the main driver of production growth. Although additional supply is expected from Iran if international sanctions are removed, OPEC production is expected to remain flat. So overall, global oil supply is projected at 95.7 million barrels a day in 2015, 96.03 million barrels a day in 2016. I will now look at prices. For the first quarter of 2015, WTI, that's West Texas Intermediate, averaged $40.43 per barrel, while dated Brent edged $5.21 higher at 53.64 cents a barrel. The second quarter saw relatively healthy crude oil prices as they were supported by political instability and violence in the Middle East, a partial decline in U.S. shale production, and smaller than expected builds in U.S. crude oil inventory. These factors pushed WTI's second quarter average to $57.84 per barrel and dated Brent to $61.92 per barrel. So you see an increase in the second quarter over the first quarter. So the trend of higher prices, which was seen in the second quarter, was interrupted as an upsurge in OPEC and non-OPEC production, unexpected increases in gasoline stocks, devaluation of the Chinese yuan, and a contraction of its manufacturing sector, and the speculation surrounding the U.S. interest rate increase weighed on crude oil prices. WTI averaged at $49.39 per barrel, while Brent averaged at $54.20 per barrel. The year-to-date average from January to September 2015 stands at $50.24 per barrel for WTI and $54.80 a barrel for Brent. And now look at methanol. U.S. spot methanol prices will continue to be pressured by improving U.S. production capacity. High natural gas containment levels in Trinidad and Tobago, the top source of methanol imports to the U.S., added another level of volatility to the spot market. That volatility intensified in 2015 as Methanex, our local company, OGI, and G2X have all started plants in the U.S. Celanese will start up its joint venture plant with Mitsui in the third quarter, further strengthening U.S. production. This will likely keep methanol prices at a relatively stable levels throughout 2015 and 16. Natural gas prices had a very bad first quarter in 2015 due to a combination of issues, namely the UNC was still in government, the drop in oil prices, increased production globally, as well as decreased demand in Europe and other parts of the world. Futures plummeted 8.8% during the first 3 months of the year. The same went for the rest of the energy industry. We should know that the U.S. will begin shipping LNG around the world by the end of 2015 in order to meet rising energy demand, which will double over the next 10 years. The U.S. Department of Energy has approved 5 export projects since 2012. Cheniere Energy is first in line and is set to start exporting this year. Recent analysis done by the EIA has shown that natural gas working inventories were 3.193 billion cubic feet on August 20, 2015. This level was 18% higher than 2014 and 4% higher than the previous 5-year average for this week. EIA projects inventories will close the injection season at the end of October at 3,840 BCF, which will be the third highest end of October level on record. So we see an increase in inventory injections. Accordingly, the EIA forecasts that the production of dry natural gas and natural gas plant liquids in the U.S. has increased markedly over the past few years, and the upward production trend continues in the annual energy outlook reference prices. Turning to ammonia, Madam Speaker. The recent energy revolution in the U.S. has resulted in lower natural gas prices, which has been impacting the global fertilizer industry. attempt to utilize the higher domestic natural gas production and the lower price natural gas in the U.S., many fertilizer companies have been building plants back there. Later this year, a large fertilizer urea plant in Iowa is scheduled to come online, and 2 fertilizer plants are planned for towns less than 75 miles away in southern Indiana. Each of these plants would use close to 0.1 BCF per day of natural gas, supporting continued growth in the industrial demand for natural gas. Developers also hope to take advantage of natural gas produced in the North Dakota Bakken Shale. 2 North Dakota ammonia-based fertilizer plants are proposed for 2018, and both are in the permitting stage. And likewise, each plant would use close to 0.1 BCF per day of natural gas, according to the manufacturers. The International Fertilizer Industry Association stated in a recent conference that global ammonia capacity is projected to grow by 16% when compared with 2014, at 250 metric tons in 2019. The main contributors to the projected capacity will be in East Asia, Eastern Europe and Central Asia, North America and Algeria. Madam Speaker, all of this points to increased competition for products coming out of Trinidad and Tobago.
Members, it is now 4:30, and in accordance with Standing Order 12.2, this sitting is now suspended for the tea break. The sitting shall resume at 5 p.m.
You're viewing the Parliament Channel 11, also broadcasting on 105.5 FM.
Trinidad and Tobago, a twin island state drawn together by historical events. Through the strength of our people, our nation rose from the ashes of our colonial past. Today, with the stately colors of our flag, we celebrate our 50th anniversary of independence and present, from Crown Colony to Republic, Trinidad and Tobago's independence journey.
Trinidad and Tobago, a twin island republic, nestled in the southernmost part of the Caribbean Sea. 2 separate islands, 1 country, joined by a political bond in